The Pathwork, as we know, talks a lot about negativity, right? You got to face your negativity, face the lower self. Um, there was a period in the Pathwork, Bill and Barbara, where, we had to kind of dredge up negativity. At least I was thinking that, the question was, okay, well, what is going on with this negativity? And you always have to try to expose it and unearth it. But then I realized something, is that instead of trying to find out whether I really was like Putin and I wanted to bomb the Ukraine, or like I really wanted to do somebody dirty in some way, kind of like, isn't there a part of me where I realized that actually negativity is pain. I realized that the pain you feel is a reflection of your negativity, or an indication about where the negativity is.
Good thought. Yeah.
In other words, that it's not, look, any kind of pain. Now, obviously, talking about pain and pleasure is a sophisticated subject, right? Because one side of slides into the other, and there's different kinds of pain, different kinds of pleasure. But like, if I feel pain about a relationship, let's say, that's a clue to where the negativity is, right? If I feel, now physical pain is maybe different, but it also could be similar. I mean, the guide often talks about how sickness is often the result of some kind of psychological issue or image or something that isn't resolved. So even a physical pain can be a clue as to negativity, where it exists, where it is. So I really thought this was correct. What do you think, Tracy?
Yes, I agree.
That when you, and it's also interesting because that in the daily review, we're asked to find the disharmonies that occur during the day. Like what was troubling or what was disharmonious. And that's a similar thing to say, what pain did you feel during the day? What was hurtful or what was painful, disharmonious? And that's a clue to where your negativity is. To what you have to uncover. So I've been thinking about that.
Alan?
Yeah.
I started to read the lecture and thinking back, okay, when we were at the center and all the activities and so on, the whole atmosphere was like heaven, okay. We're walking around in a kind of heavenly haze as compared to today. You briefly mentioned it. I mean, today is dreadful, everything, it's really tough. The whole atmosphere is switched, I think. You can
In
do this
society, well, certainly
it
was different at the center. You're talking about
The world in general.
just the world in general, the tenor of things.
Yeah, today. Yeah. So it's difficult reading that lecture, and it's then and now. And now isn't very, very good. And as compared to then, which was like heaven, everything.
Well, we
Was
were
it all new? Was it all new? Is that why it was so good?
Pardon me?
Was it all new?
What you say?
Was it all new?
When you say new, what do you mean by that?
I'm saying that you thought it was heaven. So my question is, do you think was it because it was all new to you? I don't know why it was heaven.
Well, I'm thinking about then and now. Okay, now it's pretty rough.
Well, that was a spiritual community that we created back then, of course. But Bill, I think if you came to meet with all of us in person, it would also be heaven. We'd have a heavenly time.
Yeah. I actually have a different memory of early Path days. I remember acting out. I mean, I remember, yes, I remember people, being very out with issues and, fights and things happening. And so that was my memory. And I guess, I'm not involved with that Pathwork community, particularly until now, sort of starting to, but in my life, I find, people seem to be more open to the idea of community and connecting and wanting to, even if they're not in a spiritual community or spiritual, mode, that I'm finding in my life, that people seem to be, warmer.
I think
Just-
people are more open to spiritual things now.
Yeah, I guess that's the,
I mean, I just had I represent transit workers. We had this health fair, and you get a lot of bus drivers coming in and mechanics and stuff. And part of the health fair, they had chair yoga. And this lady came in and started talking about spirituality. And the bus operators were like, I don't even know about this. But once they started getting into it and they started feeling energy and they started moving their limbs and they started kind of focusing on what she was saying, before you know it, they were doing namaste and they were really into it and they were feeling the kind of the vibe. And this is a bunch of bus drivers here from New York City Transit. So people are a lot more open to spirituality these days, I think.
I see some-
can I, oh, go ahead.
oh,
Okay.
Mary,
this- oh, Mary, I didn't hear everything you presented, Kay, but I would talk to, heard a lot about the pain. And there's some things that I hear what you're saying, what stands out to you, because the other side of that coin is pleasure. And it's not in this lecture, but it always struck me when the guide said, when you're dissolving images, because that's what the guide's talking about, dissolving those early images, that you don't do this alone. You do not do it alone. And there was a metaphor the guide used. You'd only do it with the hand of God. And the greatest pleasure and delight and fun is that aspect of the self. So I can see why from this lecture, it might feel kind of like, wait, there isn't any fun here, So I just want to say that because there are concepts to build on that to really support you. And I'm so glad you brought out what you brought out, because it's very valuable, because it's about you and your process. And you're here to get supported, in the pleasure side of that coin also.
okay, so let me go over the lecture. I'll kind of go over it step by step and then we'll talk about it.
Is who? Yeah.
All right. Now, the first part of the lecture, a lot of this is Pathwork material that we all know pretty well. And, the lectures are holographic, right? I mean, every lecture kind of resonates with the whole substance of the Pathwork. And every lecture is like permeated with everything in the lectures. I mean, it's a sort of a paradox. Lectures are about different things, but in a way they're not. In a way, they're about the same thing. All right, so Guide first talks about the fact that we experience pain in childhood, right? And we experience pain, and part of the pain was, as the guide says, he calls it constant minor shocks. And a big part of it, non-acceptance of individuality. That's interesting, right? I mean, in other words, children are not really seen as individuals very often by their parents. I felt that way, I think, to some degree. Did other people feel that? And this creates a pain that you're not being seen. And that pain, in part, leads to the adoption of the pseudo solutions, right? And we know what those are. So the guide says, the general climate in which you grow up affects you like a constant minor shock that often leaves more of a mark than one traumatic, shocking experience. The constant climate of non-acceptance of your individuality, as well as the lack of love and understanding, cause what is called a neurosis. You accept this climate as a matter of course. You take it for granted. You believe it has to be so. Nevertheless, you suffer from it. The combination of suffering it and believing it to be an unalterable fact conditions you to develop destructive defenses. So we don't believe in ourselves. We believe either that our individuality should be rejected, or we don't choose to, we don't, as children, we need a lot of affirmation that we don't get. I think that's what he's saying. All right. So then the three pseudo solutions are put forward, which are withdrawal, submission, and aggression. So I'm probably withdrawal with a little bit of submission. Anyone else? Barbara, do you remember, what do you think your pseudo solutions are? Were?
Oh, definitely withdrawal, submission, and occasionally the aggression. I make a combo, but mainly withdrawal, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a
Talking about,
conflict.
what age are we talking about, do you think?
I think we're talking about 4 or 5. I mean, when one starts,
Yeah.
what do you think, Tracy? I mean, I think that, you know, kids, it's interesting because look at schoolyards. Look at kids, like me and my buddies in school, we basically withdrew from everybody else and we had our own stuff we were doing. We were like into comics. Well, that was later on, but you know, like there are some aggressive kids, right, in the schoolyard. There are some submissive kids who fucking get beaten up, excuse my French, as they say. You know, there's kids that like to be bullied or they get bullied, right? There's aggressive kids. There's kids that withdraw. Maybe there are other kinds of kids too, but I think the pseudo
Oh, there are-
solutions. What? I couldn't hear you. You muted yourself, Kay. Very bad.
I was unmuted and I got muted.
All right.
There's occasionally a healthy child, and I can remember seeing healthy children. I knew I wasn't one. In my first grade, I was 5 years old in first grade, and I could see how some of the kids would go right to the back of the room and get a book, or wander around, talk to boys. Maybe it was second grade. Talk to boys. I mean, I was in my chair. I wasn't moving. I guess you'd call it withdrawal. I think it was submission. Actually, I think it was submission.
Yeah. So these pseudo solutions are put forward, and you know, the guide generally doesn't say very much about aggression. I mean, he just passes over it. It does exist, but he doesn't really talk about it a lot because I think we all understand what that's about, I guess. The guide typically spends the most time on this submission pseudo solution. And the guide says this in several lectures, which I think is pretty interesting. By making yourself deliberately weak, you exert the strongest tyranny over others. So, you know, you put such a load on people by being helpless. It's your responsibility. You've got to make things better. You've got to fix it. So it's actually very hostile to be a victim, right?
Yes, yes.
Check.
Like passive aggressive then?
Well, I think that's correct. That is another way of putting it. He says it is fallacious to think that the weak person is harmless and hurts others less than the outright domineering and aggressive person. Very interesting. Interesting that he says that, right? I mean, I think that the guide really militates against the concept of the innocent victim, right? I mean, all the time the guide says there are no innocent victims. Have a nice day. But frequently, the guide kind of puts the victim in the headlights and says, this is not legitimate. You're actually laying a huge trip on people by being a victim. And you're very controlling by being a victim. And he says that in this lecture. All right, those are the pseudo solutions. Withdrawal makes you feel dead inside and robs you of the meaningfulness of life. Submission robs you of independence and strength. Originally, you wish to avoid the pain by providing yourself with a strong person to take care of you. In reality, you inflict upon yourself more pain because you can never find such a person. That person must be yourself.
That's at such a later age. That was one of the problems I had reading this. this is, if you're talking about early age. Later on, of course, you have to find yourself. But at the age of 3, there is no self. There's only,
Well, I think that it would be the role of good parents to educate, to instill in the child self-esteem and confidence in the ability to master situations, right? And that would be an education for independence that good
I
parents.
don't think it happens very often in reality. Because if you're born into a really nice family, but it's a young couple and you're the first child, they don't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on other, that could be a halfway decent, an okay mother maybe. But you also get a lot of aggressive mothers, mommy dearest mothers or narcissists, actually.
You
So
know,
I had a little problem with that in reading the beginning part of the net lecture. Then it got worse after that.
All right, well, let's keep going. All right, so the guide says that all of these pseudo solutions are aspects of the incorporated into the idealized self-image. What is the idealized self-image? He recaps. Since the nature of the idealized self-image is self-aggrandizement, it separates you from others. Since its nature is separateness, it isolates you and makes you and those you deal with lonely. Since its nature is falsity and pretense, it alienates you from yourself, from life, and from others. All this is bound to bring you pain, hurt, frustration, unfulfillment. You chose a way out of pain and frustration. The way out is the idealized self-image. But this way has proven not only inadequate, it actually brings you much more of what you wish to avoid. So the way out is this idealized self-image of separateness, superiority, envy, focusing on outer values, and basically trashing the real self and turning away from the real self. And of course, the idealized self-image is bound up with perfectionism. The perfectionism that is so deeply ingrained in you and in your idealized self-image makes it impossible for you to accept yourself and others, to accept life in its reality, and you are therefore incapable of coping with life and resolving your own problems. It causes you to forego the experience of living in the true sense. All right, so that's the pseudo solutions and the idealized self-image. Now, when we are on the pathwork, when we're on the path of self-facing, we start realizing, feeling the pain of what we've done, or our attitudes, the pain of the idealized self-image. He says, you are to some extent aware of the particular nature of your idealized self-image. You have some inkling in what way you're self-alienated and perfectionistic. You have therefore realized the extent of the damage you have inflicted upon yourself and upon others, and have seen how unsatisfactory these pseudo defenses and protections are. So I think this is what the title of the lecture really means. This is when we meet the pain of destructive patterns, when we make these realizations. So then what I would call the second section of the lecture, then the guide talks about a threshold that exists between being enmeshed in the idealized self-image and somehow opening and moving through it. He says, some of you have actually reached the threshold, opening the way to a new inner life of being emotionally willing to let go of all the defenses. Constantly observing your unrealistic and immature emotions and reactions weakens their impact and begins a process of dissolving them almost automatically. When a certain dissolution has taken place, as the psyche is ready to cross the threshold. Now, I think that what the guide is talking about here is the dissolving of images, the understanding of images and the dissolving of images. That is when through observation, right? Constantly observing your unrealistic and immature emotions and reactions, that's what the images are, right? they're unrealistic and immature emotions and reactions. They are constructs that we believe emotionally answer questions and allow us to deal with the world, but in fact, they don't. In fact, they just increase our pain and separateness. But once we work with our friends in the path of self-facing, once we're able to open up our greater perception, raise our consciousness, we're able to dissolve these images and try to look around for a new way. So now this is a very important concept in the Pathwork. Middle of page 3, constructive patterns cannot have a solid foundation before you go through the original pain and frustration you had to run away from, right? Now that hooks up to what the guide says in the very beginning of the lecture about the childhood pains that we experienced. So, you know, and this is why, of course, somewhat of a difference between the Pathwork and many other spiritual paths, which say, like, why do you have to go into all that crap? Why do you have to delve into that negativity? Why do you have to experience that pain? Can't you just try to raise your consciousness and feel oneness and feel unity? Well, the guide says, no, you can't do it that way. You can't create a foundation for progress unless you go through the original pain and frustration you had run away from. Right? So that's dissolving and understanding the images, which of course were formed when we were very young, understand how they were formed, what we felt at the time, and try to experience the wrong conclusions and then challenge those wrong conclusions. And the longer you delay this process, he says, the more difficult it is bound to be when you're finally ready to pass from childhood into adulthood.
Which page?
This is page 3, the middle of page 3.
I marked it, I had it, but I just.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the guide is saying here that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can still be a child. And maybe it doesn't matter how young you are, you can still be an adult. It's about whether you're facing yourself. That is whether you are either a child or an adult, right? I mean, of course, I'm not sure how old you can be. I guess a lot of young kids really have a lot of great self-awareness, right? That's certainly true. Anyway, a little further on, he emphasizes this: you can't run away from the pain, you have to experience it. And then he says, what I said at the very beginning, it is the wishful thinking process of running away and looking away from something that is or was, thus not facing and coping with your reality, that caused your soul's sickness. That's worth meditating on. I mean, it seems very clear to me that wishful thinking causes sickness, causes soul sickness. I mean, right? There's so much wishful thinking, turning away from reality, and that makes people sick, doesn't it? I think it seems like it does. All right, so the guide has introduced this idea that there's a threshold that we can cross from being dominated by the images to coming into a reality which is more akin, which is more real and honest. So how do you know when you're crossing the threshold? The guide talks about that on the next page, on page 4. He says, first, the outer negative events will continue to come your way as a result of your past ingrained patterns, but you will encounter them in a different way. As you learn to do so, you will become aware of many opportunities for happiness that you ignored in the past. In this way, you begin to change the patterns, that is the images, until very, very gradually, perhaps over a process of several incarnations, the unhappy outer events cease more and more. But when you find yourself at the beginning of this stage, do not expect immediate fulfillment and happiness in every respect. Do not expect it to come from the outside without your creating it by learning and experiencing in a productive way. First, you need to see your possibilities and opportunities and independent ability to choose instead of being utterly helpless and waiting for fate to bring you happiness. So the Western approach, right? The active approach, self-confrontation, self-facing, working with other people in this process of seeing possibilities and opportunities and choosing to dispel the images, choosing to visualize positively, to put positive patterns into place, right? That brings you through past that threshold. All right. Yeah, I was going to mention this earlier, but today's Good Friday. And obviously the Pathwork says a lot about Jesus Christ and the sacrifice that Christ made. And I think that in this context, of being active, it's also important to remember that there's a lot of energy out there available to us. And if we raise our consciousness, we can feel strength and power of transformation. And that is, of course, what Christ symbolizes. So it's important to remember that, I think, over this weekend, considering the value and the emphasis the guide places on Jesus Christ in the lectures. So just to continue here, crossing that threshold, the new consciousness may emerge only after a fuller understanding of all your pseudo solutions and misconceptions, whose depths will make you aware of your needs. So the guide again is talking about the need for understanding, the need for self-confrontation, analysis, if it were, image finding with your friends and others. So the primary result on this path is the understanding of your own causes and effects, and of the sense of strength, independence, self-reliance, and justice that this understanding gives to an individual. So that's what the guide is promising, that the result of this path of self-facing is the understanding of your own causes and effects, and of the sense of strength, independence, self-reliance, and justice that this understanding gives. All right. Now there are 3 more sections of this lecture that I'll summarize quickly. At the end of page 4, the guide talks about the pain that we feel. It's interesting because a lot of people are fixated on the pain that we felt or experienced as a child, but the guide says that that's really not where the pain is really coming from, fundamentally. The pain is actually coming from your present unfulfilled needs, which kind of makes sense, I think, because if we didn't experience and create pain in the present, I think we wouldn't be so fixated on the pain in the past, if that makes sense. So we do create pain on an ongoing basis by not being, because of our unfulfilled needs. And I think that the guide talks about needs in the next 2 sections, but the past doesn't have to be a sinkhole, which we dwell on all the time. The past can be dissolved, the trauma of the past, if we pay attention to how we're not fulfilled in the present. I believe that's what the guide is saying here at the bottom of page 4. Yeah, you will see that the more acute pain is your despair with yourself and with life now, not in the past. The past is important only because it caused you to institute the unproductive ways responsible for your present pain. So in other words, in the past, we created the images that are now responsible for the pain that we have today. Okay. And then again, to recap for like the 3rd or 4th time, quote, the guide says, if you do not shy away from the pain, but go through it, becoming aware of its significance, you'll realize that your present unfulfilled needs cause the pain. All right. And why do we have unfulfilled needs? It's because of our images. Because we're trying to, look for love in the wrong places, to use it, as they say. We're trying to do stuff that doesn't work, doesn't make sense. We have needs that are, we have images around the needs that we are trying to fulfill, and it's not going to work. It's like the guy that keeps on walking into a wall and bumping into the wall when the door is right over here, and he doesn't walk through the door, instead he keeps on banging into the wall. You don't understand that what you're doing is not working. You could walk through the door, but the images, the misconceptions prevent you from seeing that. I guess that's an okay metaphor. What do you think, Marian?
I think that's excellent, and it's kind of an extension of the wall within. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
We had one leads to another, because I think that's so perfect. It's what that Einsteinian quote: "Keep trying to do the same thing, and get different results. It's insanity." And so banging into the wall rather than opening the door, it was perfect. It was really illustrative. Thanks.
Okay, so anyway, just to end that section up, you feel caught in your own trap, not seeing how to get out of it, thus being dependent on outer intervention over which you have no control. See, that's always a temptation, right? For us to believe the power is outside of ourselves. We're just waiting for whoever it is to make it right. All right. Then the next section, the guide is talking about real needs, becoming aware of real needs. Now, I didn't write a lot about this, but an interesting thing in the pathwork that a lot of people don't realize much is the idea that we have a need to give as well as a need to receive. And that's very important. Sometimes I think, and I think the guide says in some lecture, that the need to give is actually greater than the need to receive.
Yes.
But if we are running around with all these images and misconceptions, in other words, think about this. If you can't trust yourself, why will other people trust you, right? And if you are encumbered by these images, you can't trust yourself. Because a lot of you, us, it's like a proverbial iceberg with 9/10 below the surface. So if you don't know that 9/10 of who you are, if you don't understand what's below the surface, it controls you. Therefore, you can't trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, other people somehow intuit that, and they can't trust you. And then you can't give to them because they don't trust you. So what do you think?
And around and around we go.
And around we go. Yeah, so the guide here again says, we have to understand our unreal superimposed needs, but only after a fuller understanding of yourself, do you gradually become aware of the basic naked needs that you have held in check. So it's about feeling the pain and feeling the need. And I think my brothers and sisters, from the old Pathwork, we got into those needs, didn't we? Back in those days, feeling the pain and the needs, these deep needs that were not fulfilled. Yeah. We became aware of our needs and of the frustration of their unfulfillment. You will find first it's the stringent need to be loved, just as the child needs to receive love and affection. However, it cannot be said that the need to be loved is childish and immature. It's only so when the adult person has locked his or her soul and refused to grow in his or her own capacity to give love, so that the need to receive remains isolated as well as covered up. Through your destructive patterns, you pushed your painful need to receive love into the unconscious. So then the guide says later, as you encounter the pain, you actually experience the tremendous pressure of your needs. And I do remember this in some of our Pathwork groups, that after the pain was really felt, then needs also came up. Isn't that so, Bill? Barbara? I mean, you remember? That's a fair statement, I think.
Yeah, I feel like there was almost like a, you know, like a rainstorm came out and it was like the calm after the storm and people were just like in like a place in themselves that was just so basic to their basic need of, you know, I just want X, you know, like a very simple place, uncomplicated. That's my
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah. All right. So then the guy talks about the need to give in what I would call the last section. Due to your progress and to the growth that has taken place, the mature need to give has also grown. Before, you could not find an outlet for this because the destructive patterns were still in effect, perhaps only partly or in a modified form. You may even have made attempts to compromise between the old and the new desired way. However, do not forget that effective results can come only when the new patterns become an integral and almost automatic reaction in you. So that is the new patterns versus the images. Unless we're able to replace the images with new patterns, we're going to be stuck in self-alienation and in the pain of negative patterns. And then at the end of the lecture, the guide makes the promise, of course. After you do so, in other words, after you are able to face these negativities and this pain, your strength, your sense of strength, adequacy, and resourcefulness will grow steadily, with occasional relapses, of course. But if you make each relapse serve as a further stepping stone, further lesson, the new patterns will eventually establish themselves in your inner being and will make you see the possibilities you have overlooked for so long. You will then have the courage to explore these possibilities instead of rejecting them in fear. Thus and only thus will fulfillment come. So the guide's really kind of pushing us to a lot of work, a lot of inner work here. The idea being that relapses, every relapse is an opportunity to confront it again and try to establish positive patterns, right?
Yep.
I mean, just like anything else, like relapsing on a diet or relapsing as a sportsman and like screwing up. Every relapse, or an alcoholic, right? Every relapse is an opportunity. Hey, you know, I gotta cope with this again. I gotta go grapple with this again. All right, so that's my summary of the lecture.
And I think back at the relationships I had with a lot of people, even after the thing kind of dissolved. You know, I think Barbara and I were both close with couples. You know, you know, thinking back, I really liked it, and I can, you know, live through almost every moment I was there, and it was, I really enjoyed it. I didn't like everybody, and I had judgments about some people because I felt that they were saying things just to go along with everybody else. That you didn't feel the goodness in them. You felt or I felt the deal conduct.
The what?
But, no, I can go back easily and really think the whole thing through. As a matter of fact, Alan, I have a whole notebook as dictated to me by your mother. I have it in my desk. I really still have it. Okay. And I have a lot of the lectures. Uh,
Well, my mother, she's 101 now.
pardon
And,
me?
you know, she'll be 101 in a couple months.
I know, I know, I know.
And she
I-
said, hey, all my old section notes, burn them.
Do
Uh,
you really?
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, well, that's kind of cool, Bill.
you
Do you
know,
ever reread them?
we kind of move on. You know, I've done a lot of, what do I call it? Dangerous things in my life, just to kind of do them.
The risk taker.
Yeah, I've been a big risk taker, and it worked out well. Okay, I don't want to go into a long stories, and you know, I've been happy. I can go back easily. But what really just amazes me today is looking at my grandchildren who, you know, with the whole school thing and the masks and this and that. And my kids don't make a big deal out of it. So it's like natural. They don't say, what do I have to wear these F masks for? It's just something that they do because they never have not worn the masks. It's really absolutely amazing. And, you know, I've been very lucky in the sense of I'm 85 and I have a big accounting tax practice and people trust me, especially they trust me with their money. I learn about them quickly. The only one who doesn't trust me is Barbara, but that's another story.
Well, I was just thinking that, you know, maybe you could help your grandkids with some of these images and some of this BS that people get caught up in. You know, look, for example, hey, I'll tell you this. If you just give those kids the gift of really seeing them as individuals, that would be cool, right?
Well, I actually, I'm a very hands-on devoted grandma. And once a week, I see all my grandchildren. And I feel like that's part of my, you know, my mission or, you know, of to do that. Absolutely. To see them as individual people rather than as in this lecture, it said as just a child, you know, that they are who they
Yeah.
are. And I, you know, I feel like I have a certain like connection or gift in that area.
You know, they don't listen to us really,
Ooh,
the kids, but
speak for yourself.
Right. But they both have a gift, and that it's the gift of learning. You know, they're very academically, I think, orientated, and they're very curious about
Wait a
things.
minute. They're 4, 5, and 20 months.
Oh, wow. How many?
But I would have a question when you're talking about images. I feel like I must have missed that lecture or that step because I feel like I'm fuzzy on this idea of images. And I'm wording if there's some place for me, you know, if there's a good lecture I should, you
Well,
know.
there are three lectures about images, or four, right? 38,
I
39.
think 28, 29, 30.
Yeah, no, I think it's
somewhere around
38, 39, 40, 41.
Mhm, mhm.
Images are basically ways of dealing with the world that are not functional, but you have adopted them because you think that they're going to make you happy.
Well, that's more like a pseudo solution.
But well, for example, let's say that
An image is a misconception that you have,
it's a
and
misconception.
a pseudo solution is a way of dealing
Well,
with this.
I mean, for example, like the guy gives an example that if you touch a burner and you're a little kid and it hurts you, then you're going to believe that the stove is hurtful, or you won't understand that you can use heat to cook something. Is that? I mean, in other words, it's a reaction. It's a wrong conclusion. In other words, let's say when I go into the kitchen, I'm going to be hurt. because you went in there once and you touched the stove. Obviously, that's not an educated way of looking at things. It's not true, but and then like, for example, like I kind of spinning this one out here. Let's say you're not going to be a chef. This guy, I'm not going to be a chef. I don't want to cook anything. And I don't really know why, but I'm not going to cook anything. I'm not going to be a chef. I'm not going to eat in the kitchen because something happened when they were 3 years old. And they formed a conclusion that being in the kitchen is dangerous, let's say. Or, well, I think an image, let's say that if pain and pleasure is linked together in an unhealthy way, it's like with a dog, right? A dog keeps barking, and if you're not training the dog properly, you let the dog out of its cage and you pet the dog, and every time the dog barks, you let him out. So then the dog believes that the only way to get affection is to be barking, right? Whereas,
That's good.
Probably right.
Yeah. Yeah, wrong conclusion. Uh-huh.
one conclusion. Stephen, want to say something?
That was an excellent overview, Alan, of what you did. It actually gave me a panorama of my life. Superb lecture, actually. The one thing that struck me that you said was, I believe so much, maybe everything's really about vibrations. And you said that there's a lot of help out there, but to reach that help, I have to raise my vibration to be in sync with the help, which has in essence a higher vibration. And that is one way of garnering help externally. But I have to raise my vibrations first. And for me personally, my images are very clear. The images of I can do it myself. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I don't want anybody. And I'll pay my own way to do whatever I need to do. And that really sufficed for me to garner enough funds to be comfortable. It sufficed for me to travel, which I traveled to many, many parts of the world and was wonderful. And I went to parts of the world a lot of people don't wish to go, but I was always doing it in search of a life that was out there, not in here. And in searching for that life, the there was always better than the here. But every time I went to the there, it became another here. And there'll be another place that's going to be better. I will find that external place that will make my life right. It's not here, it's not in the US, but it's somewhere else. Until I discovered that probably the US was the best place. And no matter how miserable I was here, the theirs were worse. So I had to turn around and face myself to see what was I doing in my own life to thwart, block my own happiness. And I clearly realized I was living based on my childhood. And I totally agree that childhood is one thing, but facing the here and now and being aware of the here and now is probably much more important. But facing the here and now is a link back to the child. So when I'm able to be in the here and now and experience some pain, what invariably comes up, or most of the time, is a memory of my childhood. But I have to be imbued and involved and completely possessed by that pain. And of course, I didn't grow up with that. So when I feel the pain now, I jump into an image, which is, let's get out of here. I have a lot of frequent miles. I'll find a place. But that doesn't work anymore. It can't work. It never did work. It only worked in my dreams. And I spent a lot of time and energy following it. So I totally agree with what was said in the lecture, is that in looking at my images, and I feel this need to give, this complete need to give. And what for me is a sign that I am following or debunking, so to speak, my images is how I feel. And when I give, I feel good. When I receive, I'm okay. I can graciously accept the gift, but it's in giving that I truly experience that aliveness that I have not fully experienced throughout my life. So much of me was dead, literally, internally, that I did not feel because I would not accept life as it was. The will always be better over there. And when I get there, the next moment, the next whatever, it will be right. This moment is not good. This moment is only a bridge to the next one. And the next one, that's going to be good. But it never worked. Finally, I've come to realize in my older age that it's really in giving and being open to others where that truly, truly brings my vibration up. And so much enters into my life, not only with other people, but with nature and my own experiences, that a whole system of the world is really wonderful. And it's not about the past that was wonderful. The world today, as I sit here in front of all of you, has really opened up to a large degree. I mean, it's not like Pollyanna, to a large degree. And I'm learning to enjoy my life and enjoying it. I'm learning to give some of that enjoyment. And I think being in a relationship, which is difficult for me, but yet allowing myself to see my images in the relationship, because the relationship is a catalyst for so much of this and a trigger of the images. And as I see it, and I'm just able to be with the image rather than strike out within the relationship. You're wrong. You're wrong. What you did was bad. Why do you keep doing that? On and on and on. But just be with that anger that so quickly comes up and points fingers, and realizing the other person too has feelings. And I need just to be with who I am at that moment. And the anger starts to dissolve into something, realizing there are other human beings on this planet. I'm not the only one. So thank you. It's a very powerful lecture, actually, and you really did a great job in the
Thank you.
overview.
Thank you. I think it's very valuable about having a higher vibration to be able to avail yourself of grace or help. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Stephen, I completely identify with everything you said. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I'm one of those other people with you.
I feel that.
Beverly, do you have any thoughts?
I guess, well, the one concept that Pathwork has kind of hit me over the head with was that we're responsible for every single thing that happens. So I was thinking about that as you were summarizing the lecture, that I think I'm to the point where I'm starting to really get that. I think I've said this before. The question is now, what do I do about it? So I was interested to hear which lectures are the ones for the images. I think I recognize when my images come up, but what about what? I have like an intellectual understanding of them, but being able to figure out what to do about it is kind of where I am. So.
Well, first recognition,
40
through the
I'm
daily
sorry.
review. It's a good way to do it.
I'm
And
sorry?
First, pinning them down
Mm.
and recognizing what they are. Writing it down. I think writing is extremely valuable. When you actually write down recognitions in pen and ink, or on your keyboard, it's really gives you more resources. It's really surprisingly powerful when you write down your self-reflections about these things,
Mm.
which is why I don't do it much, but I should.
But the lectures that talk about the images are excellent. I mean, I remember the 40 and 41. I must have read them 3 times at least. And they do help, Beverly. I think you mentioned 39 today, Alan.
38,
I
39.
forgot. 40 and 41, I know. I would read a couple of those, Beverly. They're very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
And I do relate to also, as you were saying, Stephen, that I don't want to live in the past, you know, with my childhood, but at the same time, things happening in my life yesterday, and it brings up, as Stephen said, one of the reasons why it's happening is because I believed some of the stuff that was handed to me as a child, and I'm beginning to realize that I don't believe it anymore. Thank God. You know, something like negative about myself, that I won't be accepted if I go to a party or you start interacting with people I don't know. Right away, I can almost hear my mother's voice saying, well, you know, they're going to make fun of you. You know, you're not going to want you there.
Hmm.
Well, okay, so if I don't get back there to when that happened, I'm not going to change here. Now, I didn't deal with the pain then, but I can deal with it now. And begin to let the images go that I formulated, the conclusions that I formulated as a child.
So Tracy, let me ask you the question. Why you picked this lecture? And why you thought this was a valuable one for us to study?
Well, the way I pick the lectures is always the same, which is just gotta get into a meditative state until a number comes into my brain. So there's no great thought that goes behind it. But that's how I do it. Joel spent, I want to hear Joel talk. He spent a lot of time with this lecture in the last month, and we've been talking about it a lot. So
Yeah, Joel.
yeah.
Well, I think, again, reflecting what Stephen said and Marion and Kay, I think you did an excellent job of summarizing the lecture and really hitting on the main points. The only thing that I would add, which is a little tangential, I was thinking about how today is both Good Friday and the beginning of Passover. And I made a new acquaintance yesterday, and I was speaking to him today. And he said to me, he's celebrating Passover today. And he said that Passover was, for him, it was that God was showing us our way to freedom from our addictions, whatever they might be. I suppose in the context of Pathwork, some of our addictions are our images, right? It's our guide, our map for how to live that, as Stephen said, we're not bringing us to the promised land, as it were, which really exists within us all the time. We just have to find our way back to that. But then so that was, the meaning of Passover. And then I was thinking about, well, so today is the day in Christianity that Jesus was crucified, and I was looking to see what's the significance of this day according to Christianity, and I was reading some of that, and so I think the Pathwork talks about our fall, right? We talked about that in one of the lectures, which my understanding is that's our separation from our experience of our divine self, right? Our forgetfulness of who we really are, which is a manifestation of the divine having this human experience. And so I thought, okay, so how does the lecture and the specifics of what our experience as children and how we weren't seen, and what this led to in our behaviors because of the pain that caused, and then the formation of the images and the bad patterns. And I thought, well, that's really our separation from ourself, right? so the child, when you think about it, when we were children, there was something, when I think back on it, I have some sense of my own wholeness that always was present, right? And maybe there was a loneliness also in that experience of that presence, because of the illusion of separation from others, right? That we weren't the same, that we didn't share struggles, that we didn't share a connection with each other, right? We tended to experience separation. As the lecturer said, it took the form of isolation or being needy or being aggressive, a combination of those things. And so in a sense, the resurrection, I'm sorry, the crucifixion is our own separation from ourself, right? And then our response to that was the formation of these images and our fear of going into the pain. And I think that what, at least for me, that what the crucifixion, what Jesus was trying to say to us was that nothing can separate us from this experience of wholeness and of ourselves, and that is our true nature.
So let me-
Yeah, Tracy?
So I just want to try and be succinct here, but because I want to sort of segue from what Stephen's example is, but first I want to say to Beverly that I think that you don't have to do anything. I do think that reading those 4 lectures, 38, 39, 40, 41 will be very helpful, but I don't think you have to do anything. That mere observation of your images just over and over again causes them to pixelate. I'm not copywriting. When you grab some, it's Marian's word, plagiarizing Marian's word, but it's a very good word because, when something, pixelated, it just sort of slowly dissolves and breaks apart. And when I've been doing Pathwork for 10 years now, I was, I think, lucky and unlucky at the same time. One of the first lectures I read there was a line in it that said the mere observation of one's faults will cause them to start to dissolve. And I have always been the type of person where I had to do something. And so I immediately thought, well, this is a load of shit. You're not going to get anywhere in life by sitting back and just looking. You have to do something. So but I don't think you do have to do anything. I think other than to be in honest observation of those images that you have, and I think they will start to pixelate. But maybe one thing to do is to read those lectures. But I wanted to just segue off of Stephen's. It was great, Stephen. Your example was so well described, and I have a similar story. I was never going physically to different places, but I was always going to the next achievement. So I went from, and ironically, it did start in childhood because I didn't get the love of a mother that most people, I think, enjoy. Well, maybe not most people, but some people enjoy. My mother was injured when I was born, and she was never really present. And that was left me with craving her affection and her attention. And coupled with that was something that the guide spoke about, which in our family, it wasn't that we weren't like recognized so much as individuals, but there was definite sort of air of children being less than adults. And even it manifested itself in, for the example, like at the Christmas time or the Thanksgiving, there would be an adult table and then a children's table. We wouldn't even be, children, there were 4 of us. We wouldn't be allowed to sit with the adults. We had our own separate tables. So that just it gave you the impression that you were a little bit less than the adults. But very early on, I was only 6 years old. I just by coincidence, I love the water. I was always at the swimming pool, and the swimming coach had seen that I was a good swimmer, and he talked my parents into letting me join the swim team, even though it was mostly for 8 years old and up. And I had just turned 6. My birthday's June 6th. It was the beginning of the summer in Virginia. And right from the beginning, I won the races that I was in. And I remember that the coach came over and picked me up over his head. I was probably about 30 pounds, and people were cheering. And even my mother, who was very, very much removed, had like this sort of self-satisfied smirk on her face, and this image formed. So the image was winners are loved. So that was my image, that if you achieve something, if you win something, you will be loved. And so then there started my journey, analogous to Stephen's, going to different places. And then he realized as soon as he got there that, well, this isn't it, pack my bags and get on to the next plane. So no sooner would I achieve something that it was so momentary, the satisfaction or the pleasure that gave me was so momentary. I was barely having finished one achievement that I was on to the next, constantly searching for the next thing that I could reach for in the external world to get that feeling that I was worthy and that I was loved, because I was a winner. That was my image, of my pseudo solution, was to continually, strive for that, the next thing, the next thing, until finally the Pathwork rescued me from myself. And I realized maybe 5 years into it that I was looking, in the wrong place for what I needed, which was inside of me. And once I did that, and I turned my focus, almost like rotating my eyeballs in my head from the looking outward to looking inside, I've started to feel that tremendous sense of peace that I had been searching for by trying to go pack my bags and go to different places. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good description of an image too. Very
Thank you.
good
Well put.
illustration.
Yeah, maybe I can add something to that.
Marion, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Tracy, for sharing yours with such, in a way that could be very empathic and kind of walk with you in those shoes or beside you. And in the Pathwork, there's so many gems, it's just impossible for me to even say very much, because my main personality defense is emotion. And so that's the submissive type. And we used to have little workshops where we would all embody our dominant one. And we had a song for each one that exhibited. And then we would go through the higher self, the lower self, the mask. And it's true what the guide says about being very submissive. There's an element of hate. It is really self-hate, but it's projected out to the one that I feel that has power over me. It's because I give my power to someone else. So that was my pattern. Give my power away to somebody else. They dominate. And so from the images, we all, and the guide teaches this, formed an image statement. So here's the whole massive image work, going to the past, defining it, see what happened, all that, and actually experiencing it energetically. So when core energetics came in, that really helped a lot, because we understood that in the energy field is where disease starts. It starts in there, not the physical body. The physical body is the end result of what happens there. Then what happens in the mental body. And so that was so clarifying so much of what I had to bring forth out of me. So that's when we did a lot of, I killed a lot of people off in a safe way. And so that's one of my, and so someone else, I forget, so I have my toolbox, of being that emotion type, giving my power over to others, wanting to kill them off, because I have to be the killer to balance that out, but hide it. So every day I have on my toolbox list over my to-do list all of my tools. And one of us is LS, L period, S period, which is lower self. And so every time I'm in a conundrum, my mind is going real fast because I also have a mantra. When that mantra is gone and I'm just spinning up here, I know that I'm in my lower self. So then I talk to God, and it's what you said, Tracy. There is that first step of transformation is observation, but we don't jump into that right away until there is some release with a helping hand, because the guy did say, you know, you have to have some help to do that because it can feel so terrifying. Well, I've done so much of it, it seems like first nature to me now. I go in, I've got still got my bataka, my hitting bat, and I go in and I look at my spiritual master's picture and I set an intention. And we have that wonderful lecture, The Power of the Word. The vibration of the words we use and think are so important. So I use the word intention when I'm ready to let go. So I look at this picture of what I call God in human form, and I say, so-and-so has triggered in me a lot of hatred. Because I'm being honest, nobody else causes my pain and my suffering. Nobody. It's there in me. So I'll say, my intention is to release what's triggered in me by this or that or not circumstances or a person. Often it's a person, so that I may be filled with your, and I'm talking to God, your light, love, and life. Then I let it rip. And I mean, I throw people off the George Washington Bridge, and I bury people in a mud pile, and I get sand in their throat. I mean, I am so creative with what I do when it comes out of me. But I've set my intention first. Don't just do that. And then I know how to ground, and I end up vibrating and my going up and down because I know how to ground. It's so important what we do with our energy system. Then I ground and I end up smiling. And I just bow and I go on with my day. And then I go to my to-do list where I have my toolbox across the top and I check off that I did one lower self because I know I'm going to have to do more. So I check off, oh, I did that one. There's going to be more throughout the day. Today I wasn't at home. I was walking in the park and my mind. So I said to myself, oh, when I get home, I'm going to have to do some lower self work. And I heard from my God self, do it now. So while I was walking in the park, I quickly went through all the layers and released it. It wasn't, I didn't draw attention. So that's just one aspect of this lecture. I'm so grateful because of also grounding in the energy work and knowing a lot of these kind of little sayings, you know. First step is observation. That means I've got to have a God to report into. And what did the guide said? And who is the observer? Spirit, of course. So it's good to remember if I'm going to report and I got to tell God, hey, I notice my mind is going crazy because I'm so resenting not being invited to a family thing with so-and-so in the family, and they invited the other side of the family and not me. And I'm furious. Well, if I try to choke that down, it's just, I'm going to be miserable. But I know I've got to get it out, but I have to connect with my God self, what I'm going to do, and state my intention. So all of this is to bring us to God. It's in the lectures. We're returning to our original state of oneness. So it behooves us to have that as our best friend. So that's it. So that's my best friend, is that self. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me, Marion, of core energetics. I've realized how important body work is, movement, releasing of energy. I tend to be more intellectual, but I have to force myself to do the work with the body. And I realize what an important component that is. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes, and if you're more the thinker type, you're not going to want to do what I just get wild, you know. Yours may be, you know, spitting in the sink and releasing some of your anger or something. I don't know. Everybody's got their own ways of doing it. And it's so beautiful that we each have it's so personal. It's so personal. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think I have an image that I could share that is something that I am, have not worked through, but I've been a caregiver my whole life. A wife, a mother. I took care of both my parents when they were ill. Now I'm, an active grandma, and also in my career, I was a manager, taking care of a lot of, well, not a lot, but it was a small manager taking care of people. And that one of the things that I have difficulty with is, wanting to, really being in that role and just seeing the other person and wanting to help and explain and be there for them. But sometimes I feel that what happens is that I lose, I do it to the detriment of myself. And there's that story that I can never wrap my mind around. It's, the gift of the Magi. Um, just a quick recap, the couple, she has beautiful long hair and he has this wonderful watch that he loves. So she cuts her hair to give him, like, I guess, a chain for his watch, and he sells his watch, to buy a barrette for her hair, so that it's this feeling that somewhere in me is this image that you must sort of like, that love means sacrificing yourself. And I find that a really difficult thing to understand and work out. Sometimes I think I can feel it and know it and understand, but it's like it's beyond me intellectually and emotionally. So that's just something that is I'm sharing, and I don't know how I mean, I think I feel the pain sometimes where I feel like I've lost myself, and it's just it's like I need to go to my LS and get that energy back to find the love part when I'm angry and resentful. So that's my sharing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Uh, I have found that you talk about sharing and connecting with people, but I have found sometimes sharing with people can be really treacherous and really difficult and really dangerous, because the people you want to share with don't want to hear it. They're not particularly interested in your sharing, and they're saying, "Who is this jerk telling me X, Y, and Z? It's none of his business." Okay, and I have found that frequently that uh, I'm going to create enemies. Okay, by sharing, because they don't want to hear it. I don't know if you get that.
Well,
Because
I mean, there's,
it's one thing, people in the past, but Mr. Jones and Miss this and that, they're not they're not they can't accommodate your sharing and don't take it in that spirit. I have found this frequently.
well, you have to have the right group in which you can share.
Pardon me?
I think what Steve was talking about, the vibrations, if people don't have a high enough vibration to understand or accommodate your sharing, then they're not going to get it.
Well, even no, I know some people from Unity, Marion, and even them, you got to be careful. You got to be careful what you say. People who profess to have that kind of point of view, but they really don't. And, maybe some, it's really difficult being careful of who you want to share with.
Well, let me make one comment because Alan pointed out in this lecture about needs, getting to needs. And there were a group of us way back when, those who remember Joy Hubert, and this is going way back when nonviolent communication first came out in a book by Marshall Rosenberg. There's a whole group of us that really latched onto that. I still practice it. I'm in an empathy group. And it really was like it came out, it's like it came out of the Pathwork, communication. The communication lecture, it's more specific. It's like applying the communication lecture, and it's real needs, how to get to your real needs, and how to go through where needs are not met. And one of them is mutuality, companionship, sharing. There's a whole long list. You can get it online, needs and feeling sheets. And you can look NVC and get the needs and feeling sheets. There's a lot of needs and feelings, and they're distinguished from emotion. And so it really opened up a lot of world for me and many others and here's the guide is so clear about that, is how do you get to the real needs if they're not being met? Maybe I don't even know what all mine are. Maybe I think I've got 4 needs and I've really got 50. I don't know, so it's like what you're saying is a real need, and stay with it, stay with the need. And you can ask your God self, what support do I need to get this need met, to have more mutual sharing? Oh, okay. And put a period after it and let it go.
Right. And you can always share with me, sort of. No.
I have a question. Do you think that the group that you're with, or the people that are not interested in what you're sharing, is it something to do with the dynamics between those people and yourself? In other words, are you in the right group? I guess I'm saying.
For about 5 years, I was in a group. We met every other week, and they were all psychiatrists, and they were like, quote, experts in sharing. Okay, and they go very deep into themselves. And this seemed to be a good target group. And they talk about their lives, patients they had, and things they did wrong. But even then, sharing what I think about what they're saying and going into a bit more predicated on things they have said, they can really blow up and say, "Who are you?" Yeah.
They say that? I'm sorry, I missed it. Did they actually say that?
Yes.
Do they verbalize it?
Yes. Definitely.
I'm sorry. I'm feeling sad myself when I'm hearing you, because I certainly, for myself, I wouldn't want to be in a group that was putting me down. That was
They're not putting me
minimizing.
down. They're kind of questioning my sharing and saying you're absolutely wrong.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. It's kind of mixed.
I think that what Marion said was very right on, felt that way to me, that you seem to have a need for sharing on a deep level, and that need can be met, I would say, maybe with different people, or people with a higher vibration. I like the way what Stephen said, because, the whole thing about what you choose to consume, what you choose to busy yourself with, who you choose to associate with, all those things have to do with your vibration, I think, how you spend your time. And if you are going after a vision which is more inclusive, I mean, not inclusive is the wrong word, if you're trying to contact your real self and relate to others in a more real way and honest way, I think all of us can find that. Certainly, in the Pathwork, we can do that. But there are always people prepared to go deeper. Like today, I represent transit workers, and we had some guy open fire on the N train and shot 10 people 2 days ago. And so today we brought the crew to City Hall, and the mayor gave the proclamations for their evacuating the car. And so this one conductor, she described, she was very calm when it happened. And, she saw that people were spilling out of the car and people were injured and they were falling on the platform. And she just said, look, I just gave the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, we have a smoke condition where another train's pulling in. If you're not injured, please get on that train. And she was very, very, very calm. And the news reporter said, well, how could you be so calm? And she said, well, if I'm calm, other people will be calm. And the best way for me to control a situation is to be very calm. And other people will get the vibration of calmness. So that was kind of interesting. And I kind of talked with her myself, and we kind of connected on another level. So you can always,
like, yeah, it's that law of attraction, like attracts like. And that's why I also have in my toolbox, raise my vibration every day, because mine gets very low and complaining. We emotion type like to complain. And so I turn my complaints over to God, but I have a plant. I have a beautiful azalea plant in my window that gets pink flowers. So I just tell it how much I love it, and the green and pink is the color of my heart chakras. And it sounds like an exercise, but it ends up turning to be real when I just rave on and on about this plant and how beautiful you are. Then if I find other things I can do that, at first it sounds fake until I realize I do it enough. It is more real than when I go around with my sort of, okay, I got to pay my bills and I got to wash the floor and I got to do this and I got to do that. It's becoming more real and more who I am than this lower one. So it's what you said, Stephen, raise the vibration, even if it's an exercise every day. Practice takes us there. Practice takes us there. Yeah.
I think it's intuition. I would never share what I shared tonight with just people in a group, but I knew it's safe to do it. And on occasion, it's relatively rare, I'll meet somebody that I really don't know and they'll open up to me. And conversely, I'll open up to them. I just feel the vibration. It's going back and forth. And I know they won't reject what I'm saying. They'll understand it. And it's synergistic. It grows. It's exponential. But it's relatively rare. So I don't normally share these things unless I can truly feel that it's safe. And I just know intuitively when it's safe.
all right, my friends, anything else, or shall we have our meditation?
Sounds good.
Like to have a meditation.
Sounds good. Wonderful.
Candle. It's here.
All right, so Tracy's going to get a candle.
Mhm. In the back is your bunch of matches. I'm gonna just put it on a napkin.
All right, so I'm going to read the last paragraph of the lecture, and we'll have our 15-minute meditation. I really feel that we share beautiful energy, which is empowering. And I think that it gives us strength and it's very meaningful. And I love that feeling. All right, so. I'm fine. Do not forget that effective results can come only when the new patterns become an integral and almost automatic reaction in you. Your old patterns have been in existence for years, decades, and often through several lifetimes in which you have shied away from facing the same problems and facing life as it is. Now, as you learn to do so and have begun to change inwardly, outer change does not come at once. In this period, the pressure inside may become most stringent. However, if you realize all this and have the courage to go through it, you are bound to come out a stronger, happier person, better equipped to live in the true sense of the word. Beware of turning back into evasion all over again. Do not believe that this temporary period in which you encounter all the accumulated inner pressure with the accompanying helplessness, inadequacy, and confusion is the final result. It is the tunnel through which you must pass, my friends. After you do so, your sense of strength, adequacy, and resourcefulness will grow steadily, with occasional relapses, of course. But if you make each relapse serve as a further stepping stone, further lesson, the new patterns will eventually establish themselves in your inner being and will make you see the possibilities you have overlooked for so long. You will then have the courage to explore these possibilities instead of rejecting them in fear. Thus, and thus only, will the fulfillment come. And then at the end, the guide says, my dearest friends, be blessed each one of you. May these words be a further key and a help for your continued growth and liberation. May they help you to become yourself, to be in full possession of the individual you are, with all the resources, the strength, the ingenuity, the creativity, and love force that is inherent in you, waiting to be allowed to function freely. Be in peace and be in God.
Yeah.
We'll have our meditation.
Set the timer.
Mhm.